Hey guys, Char5 here, and today we are starting the beginning of the end, I guess, for Creepy Month, with the first of the three, let's call them the Universal monsters, and that has a double meaning, actually. Universal in the sense that I think around the world these characters are recognized as classic monsters, movie monsters, novel monsters, or otherwise, and also the second meaning is that they're monsters that came into the public's eye, usually because they had films based on them that were produced by Universal Studios back in like the 30s and the 40s. And the first one I have on my list is the Wolfman, and this was kind of a hard decision because originally what my sister and I had in mind, as I said, I was the one that kind of suggested we do like these last three characters, mostly because we couldn't really come up with anything else. My sister came up with most of the list when it came to like the movie monsters and the cutesy characters. And I guess I sort of did the second half, and I was sort of in charge of making the list to know like what we were going to do on what day. And it really came down to this because we had a fifth week that we didn't know what to do with, or half a week, I guess, since it's not really a full week. And I figured, you know what, well, let's just do the ones that started all these, you know, more contemporary characters. And they're characters that, you know, you find in all forms of fiction. Like when you think Halloween, stereotypically, you think of these monsters, and I think like the werewolf is one of the ones that you think of the most. And it's funny because it wasn't even the werewolf, it's the Wolfman. And ironically, the Wolfman almost didn't make the list because what I wanted to do originally was, God, I mean, I guess I'll give it away anyway. What I wanted to do was Dracula, Frankenstein, and Nosferatu. But then I realized, well, Nosferatu, like, when I did more looking into it, I realized, well, Nosferatu is a vampire as well, so that's, I don't know if I want to do that. And upon further investigation, what the hell's his name? Nosferatu himself is just another version of Dracula, so it's like there was no point in doing that again, even if their designs were different. I really felt like there was no point in that, so this was a last-minute like change, and I figured, you know what, I wanted to do like a Wolfman anyway. Even my only problem with not wanting to do a Wolfman was that it's a very generic design, you know, like you see it, it's like, oh, it's a werewolf. You don't immediately think like, oh, that's the Wolfman, because there usually isn't like a specific Wolfman. And the story behind the movies is actually kind of an interesting one, considering that of the three that we're going to be doing, the Wolfman was the one that sort of appeared at the end of the line. And it's funny because Universal had its own like Marvel Cinematic Universe going on, even back in the 30s, like these cinematic universes existed, where like these movie monsters had their own movies and then started appearing in each other's movies and then, you know, had their TV specials and stuff like that. It's really funny to read upon these classic, the history of these classic characters in these movies. And I feel like the Wolfman was probably the one that I had the least amount of material to read about, considering that like it's incredibly generic, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but just that so many people can be a werewolf or a Wolfman. In fact, the Wolfman, which is the piece that I'm doing these. These are the first ones that I'm doing without a reference. For the rest of Creepy Month, I've been working with references, and for these three, I thought because they're so iconic, I'd rather not do them with a reference because there's no point. But this is mostly supposed to be inspired by the Wolfman, again, which was published by, well, published sounds weird, produced by by Universal Studios in 1941. That was the second movie that Universal did based on a werewolf, though, because in 1935 they had a werewolf in London, which I think became sort of a cult classic movie because in its time people didn't really pay much attention to that film. And it's funny because those movies, I think, have gotten a bunch of remakes. I know that the Wolfman got a remake again by Universal in 2010, but it was it got like mixed to negative reviews, so they figured, you know what, yeah, we kind of can't do this again. It sucks, but and the story behind the Wolfman itself is, again, about as generic as you can get. It's this dude that meets up with his father, and he goes to this store and meets a woman there who, you know, I think he actually takes a fancy to her, and ends up buying a silver walking stick, a walking cane, and he comes across, like, I think it's a girl that's getting attacked by a bunch of wolves, and he gets bitten by one of the wolves, and it turns out that he goes to a gypsy who later explains that the wolf that bit him was her son. And her son, like that werewolf, is played by Bela Lugosi, who a lot of people might recognize as the original Bram Stoker's Dracula, I believe. I'll try to read up on that again, because I know that I did do some investigating, because despite the fact that we know these characters so well, we don't really know their origins. Like, despite how well known, you know, and how identifiable these characters are, we only see what we know, you know, like, oh, that's this character, that's Dracula, sure, but do we know how they started? Do we know their stories? Like, we know references, sure, but we don't really know how they came about. So to me, that's another thing that's been really interesting about Creepy Month this year, and just like looking up how a lot of these characters started. So Larry Talbot is the name, or Talbot, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, is the name of the Wolfman character, and he was played by Lon Chaney, I don't remember, Jr., who was the son of famed actor at the time as well, Lon Chaney Sr. And actually, it was really funny to read that, because Lon Chaney Sr. did a bunch of movie monster characters as well in the 20s and 30s, but then he got like a little bit too old for it, and then his son took over those duties for him, in a way, and they even started crediting him not as Lon Chaney Jr., but just as Lon Chaney, so that people wouldn't feel alienated about it, and would keep watching these monster movies, because they were being just so profitable. Monster movies back in the 30s were like comic book movies now, you know, like, where, oh my god, people are so into these films, and, you know, we're getting a financial gain from this. We need to keep making more of these. We need to keep milking this. And like, it's really cool to go back in time and read about how these movies were received, and how, you know, for the time they were super innovative. Their special effects were so good, and, you know, the makeup and everything, it was just incredible for the time. And you look back on it, it's like, that's a Halloween costume, you know, like, there's nothing too special about it, but for the time, it was incredible, and it was actually really unnerving. Like, I'm sure if you look back on these movies now, like, they're nothing special, but there's something special in terms of historical value. It's not about whether or not it's scary, it's, you know, whether or not they have a story to tell, and if the story makes sense, and if the story is at least enjoyable. And I'd imagine that most of these are. I personally haven't seen any of them, but I have wanted to, particularly Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. Those are two movies that I've actually only recently have gotten the interest in watching, because I've heard how much of an impact they've made on modern storytelling and modern, you know, characters. And so, okay, so basically, Larry Talbot gets bit by this werewolf, and, you know, once the full moon comes around, he'll turn into a werewolf as well. And I think that may be where the whole, like, if you get bit by one, you become one too sort of thing started. It might have been Dracula as well, because it might have been. I don't know, like, why this like virus sort of trope started. But it does make for good reading. Like, it does sort of scare you into, like, oh, I don't want to be one of them. You know, they're the bad guys. I don't want to be one of the bad guys. And so, again, what I wanted to do was, like, I didn't want it to look sort of like half man, half wolf, because I feel like it would have been really goofy in terms of a design. So I really, like I said, since I'm not going off of a reference, I tried to do the most with my imagination as I could, and I kind of just ended up doing like a sort of new school and the only reason I call it that is because that's one of the only terminologies when it comes to art that I know, and I know that that's more of a thing in tattooing. But I look at what I did is like it has a lot of the characteristics of what that style is. It's just like really super cartoony, exaggerated features like the eyes and stuff. I made the eyes like super cartoony big. I don't know why. And it just looks like a cartoon wolf with a shirt. So like there's nothing that super stands out about him. But I don't know. Like I feel like the same could be said about the Wolfman anyway. It's a dude in a wolf costume. All in all. But again, I can imagine that it would be it would be an unnerving thing at the time. And the funny thing is, again, like I said, they had this sort of cinematic universe back in the day where, like, Bela Lugosi would play Dracula, Lon Chaney Jr. would play the Wolfman, and, oh God, I think Bela Lugosi played Frankenstein too, but there was someone else who played Frankenstein as well. God, I need to remember his name. Oh man, this is gonna kill me because I know that I know the name, and I'm not remembering it. God damn it. Damn it, I know who it is. Oh man, I can't remember. Whatever. Well, anyway, because Bela Lugosi has been Frankenstein in some of the films, and he was also Dracula. Like I said before, he was Dracula. In some films, he was Frankenstein, but Frankenstein was also someone else. And I'll remember it like after I end up making this video. This is the final piece, by the way. Again, I think it's a very cutesy kind of looking wolf. Like it's nothing too creepy about it, but at the same time, it is just a wolf. Like what could I really do with it? I guess I could have done something more messed up with it, like him eviscerating someone, or I don't know. But in terms of like how clean it is and how like I couldn't really do much with the shading, I think. I did the best with what I could, and there are certain things about it that I like, certain things that I don't. I mostly like just how clean it is, and, you know, because it's applying what I know versus what I've learned. Like, I know how to make cartoon characters, and I've learned how to, like, do it without having to use guidelines. This Inktober has really helped me with that, you know, cleaning up my drawings and knowing that I don't have to use guidelines for everything, but guidelines do make it easier for me. But yeah, this is the first in a 3-part series, again, of Universal, I guess we could call it that, Universal Monsters. Have you ever seen The Wolfman, or A Werewolf in London, or Teen Werewolf starring Michael J. Fox, or I'm turning into a werewolf from Goosebumps, or see, like, it inspired so many things, and, you know, we have Lon Chaney Jr. to thank for that. Even when he was sick, he would still wear the werewolf outfit. He even did it for movies outside of the country. He apparently did the character for like a Mexican film and a Spanish film and stuff like that. It's like it's crazy. It's such a love for the character, and it's awesome because it spanned like 30-something years. So my hat is off to him. But thank you so much for watching. Tomorrow, I will see you guys for Frankenstein, or more accurately, Frankenstein's monster. Stay safe and stay awesome. This is Jar5 signing off.